Indiana is back from the bye week, and the challenge ahead is the Oregon Ducks. The Hoosiers are unbeaten at 5-0, but now face one of the most explosive teams in the Big Ten. Can Curt Cignetti's squad keep the momentum alive on the road in Autzen Stadium? We'll break down Indiana's start, take a closer look at Oregon, and set the stage for a matchup that could define the season. Buckle up, Hoosier Nation. The Hoosier Tailgate starts now.
And picked off up the sideline. Indiana, Asbury, walking them down. Woo! IU, America, they got a football team now.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome into the Hoosier Football Tailgate here on the Hoosier.com. I am the coach, Shannon Griffith, and welcome to those that are joining us from either X, Facebook, or YouTube. We appreciate you coming by to spend an hour with us tonight as we talk Indiana Hoosier football as they get beyond the bye week and right now heading into Oregon Duck Week as the Hoosiers and the Oregon Ducks will meet up in Eugene, home as well to ESPN's College Game Day on site, as well as this will probably be the biggest game in the country on Saturday as the Indiana Hoosiers, ranked now number 7th in the country, take on the number 3 ranked Oregon Ducks, and Dan Lanning's crew coming off a huge win over Penn State in overtime a week ago. They also had a bye week this past week, and crazy college football. You got to love it. Penn State falls to UCLA, a team that was winless, fired their coach, and Tino Sunseri, their offensive coordinator. Coach Neuheisel's son, Rick, took over the play calling duties, and they delivered for Coach Skipper a big-time win in the Rose Bowl over Penn State. And James Franklin, of course, as you can understand, has been under fire ever since then up through today at his presser as well. But we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. We've got a jam-packed show here this evening. Joining me here in a few minutes from the Hoosier.com, Drew Rosenberg. We'll talk a little bit about the bye week and a peek ahead to Oregon. Normally, we're coming off a Monday night where we're reviewing the previous Saturday's ball game. But, of course, we didn't have a game. So this week, we'll take a little bit more time breaking into this week and weeks ahead for the Indiana Hoosiers as they now start their big march towards the middle and end of the 2025 football season, with their sights firmly planted at potentially being in the Big Ten Conference Championship game, but also a possibility of appearing in the college football playoffs for their second year in a row. But Indiana right now enjoying this past week off, having a chance to kind of heal the bumps and bruises and get an early start on this Oregon Duck team. We did talk about this major upset that Penn State took. They went from being in the top 5 to completely out of the AP poll. They are still ranked in the coaches poll, I believe 22nd overall. You like for them to stay in the ranked category because that always helps Indiana as it pertains to ranked teams potentially. But we cannot even think about that right now because the biggest task Indiana has faced to date lies in front of them with the Oregon Ducks. We talked about the 3-game gauntlet that Indiana had there, with Illinois, Iowa being a couple of those big games, and they came through with flying colors. And therefore, they've got themselves a chance now to set their sights on the Oregon Ducks, playing with a little bit of house money in that respect because they come through that 3-game gauntlet unscathed in the win-loss category. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. We'll talk a little bit, if we've got time, to switch over to Coach Cignetti's presser today. Not much of a, anything out of the ordinary for his normal Monday presser. It is reported that D'Angelo Pons will be back for Saturday's contest against Oregon. And for the most part, they're a pretty healthy football team, all considering a pretty grueling start there for the first 5 weeks of the season. But they're heading into Eugene fully healthy for this game against the Oregon Ducks. And it's going to be an interesting dynamic there in Eugene. And again, we'll have plenty of time this week to discuss that in full as we get going here. Hoosiers, like I said, moved up to number 7, I believe, also in both polls. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. With both of those polls, we'll get them up and show you where Indiana is at. But right now, Indiana has got everything in front of them, and they control their own destiny. And as a football team, that's all you care about, is controlling your own destiny and not having to rely on anyone else to help you out in that regard. And Robert, Penn State and Texas fell hard in the college polls as the 2 biggest and highest rated teams in the preseason polls that AP publishes are now completely out. Imagine that. And again, that goes back to my earlier statements during the season that the polls should be banned until about week 4 or 5, AP, whatever, because you just do not have enough information to go into the season putting people in spots that you have no clue of where they really are at until you get about to the 3rd, 4th, 5th week of the season. And that just proves the point right there. Penn State and Texas dropping hard and almost basically out of some of the AP polls. But again, those people just don't have a clue. And I'm not saying that in a negative context about where they are at in that regard. Let's see, John, appreciate you for coming in. Well, that wouldn't be unexpected in Eugene. They have a lot of rain out there in that area between Washington and Oregon, and it's just a common thing that you deal with out there on the West Coast, especially that far north, that you're going to get some rain. It may be an all-day light rain. It may be a situational type of scenarios where you get it here and there, but we'll have to wait and see how it all falls out. The beauty of it is a 3:30 kickoff East Coast time, 12:30 West Coast time on CBS. So in that regard, that's a unique thing for Indiana. And we'll talk a little bit about with Drew here in a second too, with some of those things as it pertains to travel, because that's been a big topic of conversation with teams either going from the West Coast to the Midwest to East Coast and vice versa, and whether or not that plays a huge role in a team's performance. And I know Penn State's looking for answers in that regard, since they were the latest team to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, especially being a ranked team and losing to a winless team like UCLA. So we'll look at that here in a second as well. Last thing here, just for those historians out there, last time the Hoosiers played Oregon was back in 2004. They beat Oregon 30-24 in that ball game. Trivia question: who was the head coach for Indiana back in 2004? And that's a little trivia for tonight. If somebody could say that, it will maybe get you a big time pat on the back. But kind of an interesting dynamic that Indiana went out there in 2004 and beat an Oregon team that people thought highly of that particular night. But again, we're going to get things rolling here. I'm pleased to be joined by Colin. I'm sorry, Drew Rosenberg. Hold on here, Drew. I'm going to get you pulled up, hopefully, here in a quick second as we try to get everything. There he is. Can you hear me okay, Drew?
I can, Coach. How are you doing?
Good. And that is Robert. It was, and DiNardo was that head coach back in the day for the Indiana Hoosiers when they last played Oregon. And of course, again, tonight, guys, if you do hear an echo between me and Drew, please let me know so I can make some adjustments on my end, and we can go from there. But I think we're all set and ready to roll with these things tonight. And Drew, I think for taking the time to get on here. I know at the Hoosier.com, things are a little crazy right now. You got the Indiana Hoosiers who are ranked 7th on the biggest trip of their season out west. And on top of that, college basketball is starting to ramp up. And so you're juggling two sports as we talk about it tonight with both the Hoosier.com, with all the different, you guys writing stories for all the viewing public out there. So I appreciate you stopping out here tonight to jump on real quick. And, what, I guess the first question I got for you from your perspective, what jumped out to you the most with this Hoosier team through the first 5 games of this 2025 season?
It's the physicality. I think last season, we saw they had skill guys on the outside who can make plays on offense. Defense, same thing. You got guys like Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons making plays. But the physicality up front on both sides, it's felt very different. You had the Illinois game where that was kind of the question last year, against Ohio State, Notre Dame. Indiana, frankly, got bullied in the trenches. And against Illinois, they were the bullies. Iowa against one of the best offensive lines in the country. People like to make fun of Iowa's offense, but that's how they want to play football because of how good their offensive line is. And Indiana held their own in that game as well. And I think, Oregon is going to be a different type of test than those two teams. And that's what I'm really looking forward to watching on Sunday or Saturday. Yeah,
well, the Iowa game, Iowa was able to dictate the style of play. That was the only thing there, because they like to play a game that's a little mucky and a little ugly and keep it within striking distance. And they were able to do that. And fortunately enough, Indiana made that one big play that they needed, and were able to secure a win there in Iowa City, one of the toughest places to go play. And, oh, by the way, Oregon will be the next toughest place to play, because we all know how tough it is to go out there. I think I saw something today that Dan Lanning in his tenures only lost one home game, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not totally positive if that is a factual statement. I thought I read something today to that effect, that he has only lost one game, but don't quote me on it. But it was just something that kind of jumped out at me as I was reading through some things. And I do believe I thought I saw that somewhere. But anyway, I guess continuing on with this Indiana Hoosier team, bye week, now you're coming out of it, where do you think this team, I guess, has exceeded expectations? And where is there room for them to still grow heading into this latter part of the season now?
Yeah, I think the passing game is where I think, we've seen so much growth from week 1, especially, after that Old Dominion game. Old Dominion has turned out to be a lot better of an opponent than most of us thought at the time. But the passing game, it seemed like it was going to be something, maybe it took a while for them to going, and it really didn't. After that week, really since week 1, Fernando Mendoza has been that guy. I know against Iowa wasn't the prettiest, but he made the big throws when it mattered most, and that's what you want from your quarterback. And he's really just been the guy that's, stood out. Obviously, he's in the Heisman conversation. It's done so much. But on the other side of the ball, the place I want to see, Indiana improve some more, it's Mikhail Kamara on the defensive line. He has been double-teamed a ton, and as a result, you have guys like Tyreek Tucker, Mario Landino putting up monster stats and have been unbelievable on the front, the defense. But that's going to open up Mikhail Kamara, because teams are going to realize, hey, you know what, we can't just double-team him because these other guys are killing us. And then Kamara's going to get some one-on-one opportunities. I think we will see that Saturday, and I want to see him make his presence felt, because even though he hasn't really put up the stats he put up last year, he's still making an impact. But I think those stats are going to start coming.
No question. Breaking down the Iowa film, they pretty much double teamed him no matter whether it was run or pass, and did not really give him any inch per se to go make a play. And again, that's respect. I mean, that's people from a year ago looking at it. They didn't know who he was. Here's a kid that came from James Madison. They didn't know who he was. He starts lighting things up, but they still didn't know who he was, figuring, oh, well, we can still handling with our best offensive lineman. And they found out that that wasn't true. You know, rushing ahead to 2025, they know who he is, and they're going to make things hard on him. And like you said, this is nice to see where Tyreek Tucker and Landino and, the Wheeler kid, as well as Kellen Wyatt, who I think was one of the biggest steals from the portal this past year, come in and make some huge plays. And I really like the play of Isaiah Jones and Hardy the last couple of weeks. Those two guys, even though they're split in time, have been a huge part of this defense and what they've been able to accomplish each week in and out in that regard. So again, I agree with you on that aspect of thing. Is can we get Kamara into more one-on-one situations? Is that something that we'll see Indiana, defensively speaking, DC, Brian Haynes, make some adjustments in that tinkering of trying to find him a one-on-one matchup that they can't just say he's going to line up on the right time every time. Move him around some, put him in positions they wouldn't expect him to be in maybe. So we'll see. The bye week, of course, landed at a great spot for Indiana. 5 games in, a grueling 3-game gauntlet that we all said, even when we did our group roundtable prior to the season starting, said that was going to be the defining moment for this team, because if they could come through there unscathed, pretty good, clean bill of health, and go to Oregon undefeated, they had essentially would be playing with house money in that regard. You get D'Angelo Pons back in that regard as well. But from your perspective, how important was it for this group to have that bye week now, heading into the Big Ten stretch of games that we're going to see consecutively? Because outside of Oregon, you've got a Michigan State team, although they lost a tough one at Nebraska, is improved with Aiden Childs. You got a Maryland team that's lighting it up with a true freshman at quarterback, and Indiana has to go to Maryland, in that regard as well. Of course, we got Penn State at Penn State. So even though this is the most important game of the year, we can kind of peek ahead and understand that besides this game, we're still in for a pretty good Big Ten stretch of games for Indiana coming in the few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a grueling battle against Iowa. Like, Fernando Mendoza is just one guy. He took a beating. There was a lot of big hits he took in that game. And, for a guy like that getting the week off, it's nice. He probably wouldn't have missed the game if there was one last weekend, but you get D'Angelo Pons back, which another one. You get him into the bye week at a little time, and he's going to be back on Saturday. So getting guys healthy is a big thing, but you get that break. It's split up kind of perfectly with Oregon. You get a full, 2 weeks to prepare for this really good Oregon team. Dante Moore is arguably the best quarterback in the country. Dan Lanning is arguably the best coach in the country. It's going to be such a tough battle. So having that, little break to kind of jump into that, and then the rest of the schedule. The schedule, you mentioned Michigan State, UCLA. They're not the best teams, but then you have a Maryland, Penn State, and that Maryland team you mentioned, they're sneaky good. That could be that might be a top 25 game by the time Indiana gets there. So having that break right now where it kind of splits up the first 5 games and then the next 5 before the last bye week for Indiana is really nice. Gives your opportunity for the team to get healthy and get some, things figured out that might have went wrong in the Iowa game, especially on the offensive side.
Well, I think there were 2 things that, we talked about earlier about what kind of has surprised us some this year. And Brad answered that question about Oregon. Their last loss, Brad said, was in 2022 to Washington, 37-34, and 18 home game winning streak for Indiana. So again, very, very predominant home field advantage for Oregon. And that's not atypical to West Coast teams. That's true in the Pac-12 when it was back in those days and things of that nature. But the surprise for me a little bit, Hoosiers rushing attack, where they had 4 straight games of over 300 yards rushing, which completely was a monumental start to the season to see that. Roman Hemby, Keelan back. Unfortunately, we lost BB Jr. with the injury, but the Martin kid stepped in. But I've been impressed with Hemby. He's a load, and I think we're going to see more and more of him featured in this offense. But up front, the biggest thing that concerns me going into some of these games has been protection, especially against that Iowa defense, where they had some missed assignments that have creeped up in the last few weeks of the year, of these games, where we're turning guys loose. We shouldn't be turning them loose in the protectional schemes. It happened against Illinois some. It's happened against Iowa, as you go through the year. So those are the things that I kind of hope that they were able to address this bye week, especially in the pass protection. Fernando took some shots against Iowa. I don't know how he got up on a couple of them because he got hit. And again, we'll see if they've made those adjustments in that regard. Drew, hey, we know confidence is such a big part of a huge part of football, by any sport for that matter. And when you're unbeaten like this, how much does confidence fuel the execution for this Hoosier team week after week now that we've grown into what they are offensively and defensively? Because now the guys that were replacements to a degree are now wily veterans after 5 weeks. We don't have that rookie tag on some of these guys or transfer portal tag on some of these guys. These are firmly Indiana Hoosiers that have played 5 games at 5-0 and executed at a high level for the past 5 weeks, offense and defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's a belief, not in just yourself, but in what you're doing. The game plans each week that Curt Cignetti, Brian Haynes, Mike Shanahan are putting in. Like, these guys clearly have fully bought into, Cignetti's program and what he wants to do. And that, we've seen with other coaches in the past that, guys don't always buy into your program. And winning is the quickest way to get people to buy in. And you mentioned some of these replacement guys coming in and stepping up. You mentioned them earlier, Isaiah Jones and Elijah Hardy. How about that duo?
Yeah.
All offseason, I think we talked about Jalen Walker. His absence was going to be big. Can one of those guys step up? But both of them have stepped up. And you see the confidence they're playing with, specifically Isaiah Jones, who has been really – I thought it was going to be Elijah Hardy. I think we talked about it earlier. I thought Elijah Hardy was going to be the guy. They both have been great, but Isaiah Jones has been significantly better than I thought he would be this year.
Well, he's playing with a lot of confidence, and that's the kind of the question is that here's a kid that coming off a pretty major injury a couple years ago with a bad back, broken, I think, in some respects. He did something there. Wasn't able to play for a year, came back last year, found his way here and there, special teams and in situations. And then this year, what he's been able to do, he's just been playing at such a high level. And I love the kid's motor. And in some ways, that has spurred on Hardy's motor because he found out, like, whoa, he's playing really good. If I don't start playing better and making some plays, I'm going to be sitting on the sideline and he's going to be the full-time dude. And he's made sacks. He's made block punts. I mean, he's been a huge factor for Indiana in 5 weeks. So there's no question. Confidence for him especially has been huge. And you like to see a kid like that go out and achieve the success he's achieved because he's worked so hard to get back where he's at now, fighting for a week in, week out spot within the defense. And it doesn't hurt having Aiden Fisher standing next to you either in that regard because of what he brings to the table. Secondary wise, what's your thoughts on Indiana's secondary? Because that was the one thing that we pretty much said, look, Indiana's defense is better this year. And one of those reasons it's better is because of the secondary and who they have back there. Lewis Moore now has the injunction completely behind him. It's not even a forethought now. He can go through the rest of the year, play his game, and do what he's got to do. Even when Pons was out in this past week, they had guys step into those positions. The Gandy kid was the one that stepped in and did a heck of a job. But what has been your overall impression of Indiana's secondary?
I think the versatility – there's so many playmakers around. You mentioned Lewis Moore, Mario Farrell, obviously D'Angelo Pons, who was out last week or 2 weeks ago. We saw it against Iowa. Indiana ran a lot more zone. on the back end because of D'Angelo Pons being out. So with a guy like D'Angelo Pons on the field, you can run man, you can be more aggressive. And it's something, it helps the front seven too. That's so big for a defense, but just having so many playmakers on the back end, Lewis Moore in his return got his injunction, thankfully, for this team, because he has been such a difference maker at safety. And that's probably the thinnest group on the team right now with the Byron Baldwin injury. Blanking on another injury. I know there was one more in the backside there, but just having so many playmakers, so many guys you can make plays on that, it opens stuff up for Brian Haynes to be way more aggressive up front.
Absolutely. And again, that aspect of things, again, has probably come to fruition for Indiana in the secondary, as well as Tyreek Tucker and Landino stepping up their game, and the addition of Hosa Wheeler and Daly, the kid from Kent State, where CJ West is from. He's been showing up here of late as well, especially he showed up a couple times against Iowa in that sense. So they are in that regard doing well in that aspect of things. One quick, another question here. I'm not going to run you off, but I know that you've got probably things to do, and I could probably sit here and chat with you for an hour, but give us that 1,000. Well, it's not 1,000. Let's call it 20,000 feet view of this Oregon football team, and how do you kind of see this matchup with Indiana shaping up as a test for Indiana? Kind of how you see that through your lens, looking at Oregon, initially, and just kind of, we've all kind of given a peek to them. We haven't done a lot of research, but enough to have an understanding of what this team is.
Yeah, I do want to start by saying I am extremely high in this Oregon team. I'm higher than most people. I picked Dante Moore to win the Heisman before the year started. I thought Oregon was going to win the Big Ten before the season started. This Dan Lanning it's partly him, or it's mainly him, but I think Dante Moore is so talented. We saw Dylan Gabriel, what he was able to do in Lanning's system. We saw Bo Nix, what he was able to do. I think Dante Moore is better than both of those guys. I still think he's going to win the Heisman this year. And you talk about the protection for Oregon. He's been sacked one time. He doesn't turn the ball over. That offense has just one turnover on the season, and they spread it out. It's not just one guy who is going to kill you from their skill group. I want to say they have 5 different guys who've caught at least 15 passes on the year.
Yeah, they spread it pretty good.
Same with the running game, too. They mix it up. They have a lot of different guys they trust. And then on the defensive side, you talked about protecting Fernando Mendoza. They struggled against Iowa. Mateo Ugalele, younger brother of DJ Ugalele, longtime college quarterback, played everywhere pretty much, but
yeah,
he is an issue. 10.5 sacks last year, already up to 4 this year. Containing him and keeping him really out of the Indiana backfield is going to be so big on Saturday, and it's going to go a long way in determining who ends up coming out on top in Eugene.
Yeah, their defense is big and strong. They're not a blitz-happy defense at all. They got Dylan Diamond from Purdue, who just had that big interception in the overtime game against Penn State. They use him as I'm going to call it a hybrid Mike linebacker, strong safety type, where they play a lot of robber coverage with him and allow him to kind of freely roam. And that causes some problems, especially in game planning because of passing and what that can, change up with some of the things that you got to be aware of. And, even though that game with Penn State was relatively a close back and forth ball game, I do believe Oregon outgained Penn State by 2-1 in the overall statistical data in that ball game. Penn State, I think, got, a couple breaks with some big plays, and then they went on a monstrous big-time drive in the fourth quarter that essentially tied it up, and Oregon really didn't have a chance to get down the field because Penn State had occupied the clock so much. So that's one of those games where they think, wow, that was a tough, tight ball game. It was back and forth, and man, this and that. And then you look at the stats, and Oregon had like 450 total yards of offense, and Penn State had 246 overall. And you're like, whoa, how did this become a close ball game, in that regard? So Indiana's got their hands full. They had their handful at Iowa because Iowa's defense is still a strong defense in the Big Ten and will still cause people problems. But we're going to face this team, like you said, is more in the lines of facing an Ohio State up front, physicality-wise and secondary-wise. At the same time, we're going to face a offense that has some special players at all special positions that you want to see. So there's no question. We said that in the round table, and I remember you talking about their quarterback, who I agree with on his abilities, a big, strong kid. They're just a team that doesn't beat themselves. They really don't. I mean, if you look at Oregon, like you have here, I guess that's the biggest thing. And I do think they are A, the best team in the Big Ten, and B, the best team in the country. I do really believe that they're the best team in the country overall, speaking. And I don't know how you feel about that. What's your take on them as a national program leader, be it in the Big Ten or in the country?
Yeah, I think they have to be. I think they have to be the favorite at this point. I mean, they're have played complete games all year long. Oregon against Penn State, wasn't the prettiest. They let Penn State back into that game, but going into Happy Valley for a whiteout and winning is one of the toughest things to do in college football. Yeah, you can bring up the James Franklin record in big games. I don't care. It's such a hard thing to do, winning on the road in college football, especially in that atmosphere. And doing it the way they did, I know people are going to bring up Penn State lost to UCLA last week. It's a hangover loss. It's one of the biggest hangover losses we'll see in college football all year. And that Penn State team they played was not the same team UCLA beat. It was such a big win. I think you mentioned it. This is kind of a measuring stick game for Indiana. Indiana handled Illinois without issue. They beat Iowa on the road, but last year we saw it at Ohio State, at Notre Dame. They struggled with the noise. That was a big thing on the offensive side of the football. Eugene Oxen gets loud, and I'm really curious to see how they handle the noise, the adversity of playing on the road there. And, even if Indiana loses this game, if they keep it competitive and are really in this football game, one, it's going to give them that belief that, A, they can play with anyone in the country, but it also shows the committee and, the nation that Indiana is legit. It's not this isn't some random, lucky schedule type of thing. This team is very good.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking for Indiana's going out to look for pats on the back if they keep it close. They're going out there with the mindset to win a ball game, and I don't think they're going to adjust themselves at any point during this year or even this game because it's Oregon. They're going to have to play mistake-free football. They just aren't going to have the ability to have the mistakes that have creeped in here and there, especially offensively, and be able to overcome them against a team like Oregon. The Illinois game I still scratch my head with the team that was so highly ranked, number 9th in the country. Again, I scolded the AP again because they had Penn State and Texas 1 and 2 before the season starts, and that tells you exactly what they knew. Nothing at the start of the year. And they had Illinois so highly ranked, especially in front of Indiana, that they got to number 9 and they get destroyed by Indiana. But then they come back against USC and beat a top 25 team in USC. And that was one of those games where I said, look, there's an unfair advantage for the West Coast teams coming to the Midwest because that game was a noon kickoff, essentially 11 o'clock kickoff in Illinois, but that was an 8 o'clock game in the morning for USC. Now, I'm not trying to make any excuses because coaches prepare for it and it's irregardless of where they're at and things of that nature. But you can see how that can affect the West Coast team because Oregon got off to a really slow start against Northwestern about 3 weeks ago when they played at Northwestern. Even though they won that game handedly, they started out, it was, a little rough there to get it going. So we shall see. What do you, one last question. We're seeing teams now, especially the guys from the Midwest. I saw today Michigan, Sherman Moore's press conference. They play USC out at USC. They're actually going out Thursday after practice, I believe, and going to be there for the entire day Friday leading up to their game on Saturday. Nebraska, who plays Maryland, they're doing the same thing. They're heading out to Maryland Thursday after practice, so they're there all day Friday prior to their game with Maryland on Saturday. Sig has already said they're going to adjust their schedule a quote-unquote little bit to get out to Oregon a little bit earlier than they normally would. Mistake for Indiana in that regard by not going out on a Thursday after practice and not getting acclimated sooner, or hey, they did it against UCLA last year and they proved that whether you're going from the Midwest to the West Coast, East Coast, you don't need to fully adjust your schedule for the sake of adjusting it because you're worried about time change.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about it. You mentioned the UCLA game. I think that's kind of the perfect example to look at. It's not like this is going to be an 8:30 p.m. Pacific time kick. It's going to be, I want to say 3:30. So that's
3:30 for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So 6:30 so 3:30 for us, noon for that. Yeah, but it's not one of those kicks that's like such a weird time where it's vice versa. And like you mentioned, USC coming and they're playing at 9 a.m. their time, and we saw, it took them a while to kind of get into the game. I'm not really concerned about that. I just think I trust Cignetti. We saw him do it against UCLA, and if they get blown out, I don't think anyone's going to look at them coming on Thursday versus Friday is the reason why.
All right, my man. Hey, Drew, thanks for stopping in. Appreciate you coming on the tailgate as always. Enjoy talking to you. Enjoy your view and aspects of this Indiana football team. And hey, we'll get you back on again because, like I said, I think you're a guy that knows what the hell he's talking about. But anyway, if you got a chance, follow Drew there on X at Drew_Rosenberg, correct?
Yeah, 2. Drew _Rosenberg 2. ERG, by the way. Just.
Yeah. And make sure that we can get at, and then also find all his stuff there on the Hoosier.com, as well as he's got some great stories planned and already on the hopper for this week and for weeks to come. But thanks for coming on tonight, partner.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, buddy. See ya. Drew Rosenberg from the Hoosier.com. Again, very, very well versed young man in the game of college football, and some insights that you can benefit from his writings as well as when he's on with us, because he does a great job at that. But what we're going to do right now, before we get into the weeds here, so to speak, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of the Hoosier Tailgate right here on the Hoosier.com right after these messages.
Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets. You ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors? Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana, including our Bloomington location, fun can't lose, and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. 1. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. 2. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. 3. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season 1 for the history books. Make it legendary. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER available in the U.S. Call 877.
Welcome back to the Hoosier Tailgate here on the Hoosier.com. Thanks again to Drew Rosenberg for joining us there with a great conversation of where he kind of feels this Indiana team is coming out of the bye week, some things that he thinks have been good, some things he thinks he needs to improve on, and of course his 30,000 feet above Oregon look at this Oregon team that Indiana will match up against this team on Saturday afternoon there. Well, we talked a little bit about that too, PK. It's going to be a tough task for them. And it's going to be a defensive line that they faced like against Ohio State and Notre Dame. And to a certain degree, some of what Iowa threw at them the 2 Saturdays ago. So it's going to be a monumental task for this offense, Indiana offense, to generate what they're going to need to generate in the run game, especially against this Oregon team, because they are a physically opposing football team. And that's what you expect from teams that are, tops in the country. And I just don't think they're getting enough respect when it comes to the national limelight as it pertains to what they bring to the table. I know Miami's getting glowing, pub as it pertains to them. They couldn't put Florida State away. I mean, when you look at that game against Florida State, they were up 28-3 and kind of let Florida State back in it. Ohio State, I think, the other team that's probably playing the best in the country. They got a young kid at quarterback. He did what he needed to do against Minnesota. He had a couple nice throws, but obviously I think Oregon, A to Z, is the top team in the country, as well as the Big Ten. Well, that's where a lot of these Big Ten teams have talked to these NFL teams to a degree about the travel issue and how to prepare for it or what they do to prepare for it. And everybody's different. Some coaches like to get into a rhythm and a routine where they're not changing things up completely because you get, college programs. When I was a coach, and for the number of years I was a coach, and I always said we train them like rats because, you lay out their day, A to Z, and their times, Monday through Saturday, including Sunday in some respects, for the entire year. And when you add a smidgen of gray into it because you change something, it has a tendency to throw everybody off. As stupid as that sounds, but because you're dealing with 105, 120 different bodies on top of all the administrative staff and so forth and so on, most coaches like to have a set routine, and this is how we're going to do it from the time we get here till the time we're in, whether we're at home or we're on the road. Now, there are coaches that will change things and be very abrupt about it, but they're very upfront with guys, and sometimes to do that change would be at a time of a bye week, for instance, and change things up to the extent that maybe you do adjust your travel schedule and you head to a site like a West Coast site a day earlier for acclimational purposes only. Travel has a tendency to dehydrate you. So you talk about hydration, you talk about sleep, you talk about all these different things and adjustments. And normally what a Midwest team will do when they go out west, they'll stay on their own time schedule. So they'll try to stay, even though it says 9:30 in the morning, West Coast time, they'll figure it out the way to put it. It's at 12:30, to keep the mind and the clock on the same level that where you were at. Not all do that, but some do. But again, sometimes you make too much out of it and it's not even worth to go through all the differential things that you have to do to make the adjustments. But there are teams that have taken this a little bit further this year in terms of their prep, whether it's going to the West Coast or the teams from the West Coast coming to the Midwest or East Coast because of the different time zones and stuff. And, again, Sig's one of those guys. He's been in it for too long. He's not going to make a big deal about them going to Oregon and playing a 3:30 game out west because they need to be there a day earlier. He's one of those guys. He does not like to be on a road trip somewhere too long. He'd rather get there in the minimal amount of time needed to prepare because he doesn't like sitting around a hotel for too long, which I can understand. I can understand that from that perspective. Let's take a look here a little bit at some of these polls that came out. Of course, you've got Indiana with the top 25 poll. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, that's the top 25 poll from this week, as we see there on the board in Indiana right now at number 7. Oklahoma, who's had a heck of a year thus far, coming in there at number 6. Now, they lost their big-time quarterback, Van Meter, not for the year. He will be able to come back at some point this season and have a chance to get back into the fray of things, but unfortunate timing for him to get hurt in that regard. Ole Miss, the third big win against LSU, kind of hopped over everybody, as did Texas A&M. You can see there, Ohio State, Miami, Oregon, the top 3. Georgia's back in there at 10. Texas Tech, another team kind of similar to Indiana. They found ways to get things together this year under Coach McGuire there for the Red Raiders, and playing really well. Got a big-time quarterback that's done well. And then you've got LSU, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, another team that don't close your eyes on because they're playing really well, as is Missouri. Some think Missouri is underranked, and I have a pretty good feeling that they are in some respects. Notre Dame got themselves back on winning ways, as did Illinois, who faces Ohio State this week, which is probably the other big game in the Big Ten. Now, that is at Illinois. And that game, again, we'll see how well Ohio State plays on the road in Champaign. And I've always felt Ohio State doesn't normally play as good, perhaps, in opposing stadiums, against Indiana, even though they've won those games for the most part here in Bloomington. They not necessarily have played up to the level that they're capable of. So in that regard, Virginia, what a year Virginia's having. They beat Florida State with that big win a week ago. Another young club under a new staff there for the last couple of years. Vandy, again, tough loss for them at Alabama. Pavia made a couple big time mistakes, especially down in the red zone, that took away scoring chances. Because had they converted in that game where they were down in the red zone, that may have a different outcome there. And then you can see kind of the rest of the teams there in the AP top 25. Again, Indiana at number 7, good place to be. Remember, you got to be basically in the top 11 to be in the college football playoff picture per se, because of the group of 5 schools will get that 12th bid this year, as they have in previous seasons. Although they do not get the bye that they normally got last year, so they will not get that, week off to prepare. Top 10 coaches poll came out as well, as you can see there. Indiana at number 7. Really no big major differences between the AP top 10 and the coaches top 10. The only difference there is the coaches have Oregon at number 2 behind Ohio State, which you've got to feel like that's a pretty good idea in terms of where they see them fitting in at as of right now. So nothing there that was overly earth-shattering, but pretty good with that aspect of things. So it's again, Indiana being where they're at, they jumped the spot coming off a bye week, big game at Oregon. Again, Indiana will find out whether they can keep the momentum rolling heading into Eugene this week. Past week's scores, again, Illinois went to Purdue and came away with a nice victory there in West Lafayette against the Boilermakers. And Illinois has now got themselves kind of back on track and feeling pretty confident heading into the Ohio State week. Michigan, big win against Wisconsin. Wisconsin continues to struggle. And I think they're a better team than what their record indicates. They're just, for whatever reason, they just can't get over the hump right now. And Michigan, big win there for them as they keep rolling with the young quarterback. Former Indiana wideout Devin McCauley had a great game against Wisconsin. Northwestern beat UNL Monroe. That was a big win for them as well. Even though they were outside of conference, they had some big games the last couple of weeks where they came up on the losing side of the coin. That big upset there in the Rose Bowl, 42-32, UCLA over Penn State. And again, things in Happy Valley aren't so happy this week as well, as the faithful have not been too happy with Mr. Franklin having lost to Oregon at home in a whiteout game, and then going out and laying an egg out on the West Coast. And I think Drew hit it right on the head. The Oregon game beat them twice, back-to-back weeks, because I think there was a big hangover effect from that game. Washington, big win over Maryland. Again, they've young quarterback there as well. And that was a big win for Washington, as Maryland was playing lights out for the last, 4 or 5 weeks, and they get that big win at Maryland. And so West Coast to East Coast didn't bother Washington there as they get the huge win. And Nebraska rolling, Dylan Raiola rolling. Nebraska takes care of Michigan State in a game that really wasn't much in doubt. There was some back and forth in that game, but I thought Nebraska pretty much controlled it. And then again, Ohio State thoroughly controlled the Minnesota game, 42-3 against the Gophers. And again, they look pretty darn good Saturday night. Their young quarterback, Justin Sand, kind of lit it up. They kind of turned some things loose because they've been playing it pretty conservative over the last couple of weeks of the opening year with that and things of that nature, with him being that that right mix of things that they've been doing. So let's see what we got here. Let's see. Well, I think that's the $64,000 question. How much pressure can Indiana get, be it a 4-man pressure versus this kid? Because he's a big, strong kid. He can run. He's been, he's shown to run. He scrambled pretty well against Penn State. I don't necessarily think you heat him up. Only in certain situations, you got to pick and choose your spots. But we'll see whether or not they can garner enough pressure with their up 4 rushers in this game out at Oregon. Well, we're going to talk about that probably a little bit more on Thursday as it pertains to what Indiana may or may not do as it pertains to their playbook in that respect. So, you're talking about Oklahoma's quarterback, correct? Not Oregon's quarterback. Because I don't know if I said Van Meter, then that was on me. So we'll have to see on that one. But again, Oregon, this is a team that has Sorry about that, guys. What I was saying there is they're not a team that beats themselves. They're big, physical, and strong up front. They have a run-pass game that is very complementary to what they like to do. Penn State, for the most part, played them pretty tough at times. But Oregon just had too many and too much firepower in this game. And, they go about 3 deep at the running back position, as does Indiana. And on their defensive side of the ball, they like to pressure from all different angles, but it's not a full out blitz in that respect. They pick and choose their defense and what they want to do. You're going to see some, man, 2-man under, where they use the Dylan Thyman kid from Purdue who transferred there. He's kind of a rover guy. We'll get into more of the film aspect of it with these guys as we get to Thursday. For Indiana, this is going to be one of those games where you think about it, you got to protect the quarterback. They're going to have to eliminate the explosive plays, make Oregon earn every inch that they have to earn by not giving them short fields, force them to go the long field. And, they're going to have to make a team that doesn't turn the ball over, because this is a team that's very good with the football. And the Moore kid, as you can see there, he's got a cannon for an arm, quick delivery, similar to what Mendoza doesn't keep it in it. It gets it out of his hands pretty good. And then this is what he likes, he'll do is he'll scramble and run it, and he's going to get down when he has to get down. But, he's one of those guys that can throw it from different angles, drop it down and throw it there, as you kind of saw, pitching it out to the tailback. But this group of Ducks, again, they're going to show you a lot of different looks formationally. From an offense perspective, you're going to see some different looks there, similar to what IU runs, nothing overly different. And, defensively, you're going to get predominantly a 4-man front against these guys. And at times you'll get the old true bear front, but there's a good example of them using the robber technique. And you're just not going to fool these guys. There's a screen that they almost picked off early in the game. And you can see they're fast and quick off the ball, explosive. And that's the type of throws they're going to give you. They're going to give you the dump offs because they can come up and rally against it. And, Penn State and Indiana, I'm sure will have to take the shots and gamble on 4th and 1 at the right times in this ball game. But Indiana hasn't been as great as they were in the past with 4th down. I don't think they'll have a problem with the atmosphere there in Eugene. I just think that the loud, I thought they did well with the speaker stuff that they did in practice to prepare for Iowa. But you're just not going to be able to overly prepare for the noise other than what they've done against Iowa. And, Penn State, I thought, had a decent game plan against them. They picked and choose their battles. They kept it close. I mean, it's 3-0 for the better part here in the second, but they just, they can nip and tuck you down the field as good as anybody. And then they can throw it over your head because they got the guys that can go get it down the field. And I think Indiana can get pressure, but this is the stuff that will drive you nuts as a D coordinator, letting him outside the pocket, and letting him get to the corner. You just can't let him outside the pocket. So Indiana's going to have to do a good job of keeping him in the pocket against this team. So again, this is a good ball club that Indiana will play, and you can see there from that tape that they've done pretty well for themselves, and it's going to be a monumental challenge from that perspective for Indiana to get that type of game on the road where everything just falls into place and they play hard. They play physical as much as they human possibly can. They're right now, I think they were 8.5 earlier today. I think it's down to 7.5 in terms of the point spread. And quite honestly, I thought it would be a little bit larger than that because of being at Oregon. But they're going to have to, do some things that put themselves in the best possible position on Saturday on offense and defense to take advantage of what Oregon's given you. Now, Fernando played there, I think it was last year, if I'm not mistaken, when Cal went there, and he had a pretty good game against them. And they threw it for pretty good against Oregon last year, if I'm not mistaken. So Fernando's used to that environment, which I think is huge because he's played there. He understands what he's walking into. He can also convey that to his teammates and coaches and all the things that you want to prepare for going to a place like Oregon, because none of these guys have played at Oregon, and they are walking into an environment that they don't know, specifically kind of like when they did against Iowa, because Cignetti not played there as a vast majority of those guys that have come in via the portal had not played there either. Now, there were probably some Indiana players that were under Coach Allen had played at Iowa, and so there was some continuity there. But from all practical purposes, nobody on this roster, with the exception of Boyd and Fernando, have played at Oregon. So at least they got some of that to, provide feedback to players as well as the coaches, because the coaches will pick their brains too about crowd noise, environment, things of that nature, so that they can set up this week's practice the best they can. All right, here, let's see. Boom, boom. Yeah, Brian, and I think Indiana's a call it and run it team. And that's why a lot of their running play downs are made up of RPOs in that respect. Yeah, call a better fourth down play. Yeah, in that regard. And again, Indiana, when they got a chance to get points, they got to get the points, even though 3 points may not necessarily, beat Oregon. You got to find ways to get yourself on the board and break the ice so that you can, at times, pick the chance to go for it. So in that regard, there's my daughter. Well, that's right, sis. They're going to have to try to keep Moore and company on the sideline there in Oregon, because the best offense is your defense, keeping the opposing offense on the sideline as much as possible. So, if Indiana's offense can, get a run game that's going and keep Oregon's defense at bay, at the same time keeping Oregon's offense standing to Coach Lanning on the sideline, that's better for Indiana. Well, guys, I appreciate you being a part of the Hoosier Tailgate tonight. Come Thursday, we'll break it down a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit about Indiana's 5 games up to date, maybe show some of their cut-ups on there to see what they've done, what they haven't done in that regard. And yeah, she's clearly a coach's daughter. She probably knows better than I do, quite honestly. But I appreciate you all being here with us. Thanks again to Drew Rosenberg from the Hoosier.com for joining us here tonight. But more importantly, thanks to you for joining me here on the Monday night edition of the Hoosier Tailgate. Until Friday, you guys take it easy. Till Thursday, you guys take it easy. We'll have some announcements as it pertains to what me and Jim Coyle have been up to as it pertains to pregame show now, as well as a postgame show that we've always done. We'll talk a little bit about on Thursday, give you the lowdown, and see how this Hoosier team can come out with a victory out in Eugene, Oregon come Saturday. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you Thursday night, 7:30, all right here on the Hoosier Tailgate on thehoosier.com. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. We'll see you Thursday here on the Hoosier Tailgate. Good night, everybody.